Okay, in this lecture we're going to cover data validation. Now in Microsoft Excel, often you need to force the user to make choices. Now this is normally in terms of data where you've got a table or you've got some questions and you're basically asking the user to select an entry or make a choice. Now, why is this handy in Microsoft Excel? Why do we need to force the user to make choices? Well, when analyzing and sorting data in Microsoft Excel, it helps to have standardized categories. So, for example, if you gave the user a choice to type anything they wanted in a cell, and later on you're going to analyze that data, you might get some entries which don't quite fit what you're looking for, whether it's somebody who's misspelt a certain term, or maybe it's a term that's not even applicable to your data, but they put it in anyway. Having standardized categories or entries which a user can put in, or rather are forced to put in, basically means that you can get more cleaner data when you come to analyzing it. Now with data validation, you can also put in an error message so that if the user types something they're not meant to in a box or in a cell, then Excel will flag up an error message. So data validation is a great way to prevent the user from making mistakes or by typing in something that's not correct for the type of data being sought. Now, another plus point of data validation is that no VBA is needed. It's all in Microsoft Excel, the front end of it. Now, there are different ways you can use data validation. Normally, most people do it in either tables or when you're asking questions. So, for example, if I look at this bit here, tables, and how we can use data validation, let's say for these users here, they can belong to either one of two teams, beta or gamma. Now, if, for example, somebody was manually entering this information, then, for example, if they typed in beta, but with a double T, now that would be incorrect, even though we know from just looking at the data that whoever typed it in probably meant to put beta. In other words, just with one T. Now, if you imagine if you've got this task to do every day, mistakes are going to happen. And then if you analyze this data and let's just say you put it in, for example, a pivot table, you would have to go back to the source of the table, in other words, the data, and correct that spelling mistake. Otherwise, when you're doing a count of, for example, all the students that have team beta assigned to them, this one for Gavin would come out wrong because it's spelt wrong. So it wouldn't actually count towards the result. And unless you actually check it, it would actually go unnoticed. Similarly, if the user spelt gamma wrong, for example, when they're typing in, say, Peter's entry or Karen's or Jill's. So how can we improve upon this? Well, we can use data validation and basically create a drop-down list where the user only has two options to enter in, beta or gamma. So let's do that. Right, now to get the data validation tab, you need to go to the data tab of your ribbon and head on over to here, data validation. Click on it and then select data validation. Now, folks, what we're going to do, because we want to include Karen and Jill, what you need to do is just select all the cells that you want to apply your data validation rules to. Now we're going to leave this cell empty just to give you an example when we actually put the data validation in, how it will look with or without. Okay, so you click on data validation and you've got settings, input message, and error alert. Now settings is where you put your validations criteria in. Input message is basically where if you move your mouse to a cell which has data validation, a little comment message will pop up. Now, you don't have to put this in, folks, because if you're doing it constantly one entry after another, it can get a little annoying. So we're just going to untick that. Now, error alert is really good. So basically what this does is that if you type in something that's not meant to be typed in other words, it doesn't match what your validation criteria is, you can select one of three styles of telling the user that they've made a mistake. And you can put a title and an error message. So we'll come back to that, but let's just go to settings. Now, in terms of criteria, if you click here, you can specify any type of criteria you want, from whole numbers to decimal points to lists to dates to time, text length, or you can customize an option. So in this case, we want a list because we want the user to be able to choose two entries, beta or gamma. Right. Now, you've got this bit here, source. So basically, just for this example, I'm going to create 2 entries here, and I've selected them accordingly. Right. So I'm just going to press OK, and then we'll come back to the data validation tab in a minute. But I'm just going to type in beta and gamma. Right. Now, if I go back in and go to data validation, so we've selected D26 to E26. So basically these 2 entries. Now again, folks, when you do this and you've got a bigger list, you can always put this to another sheet in your workbook so that it's hidden from you. But just to show you how it looks like, I'll put it on the sheet. Right. Now, you've got these 2 options here, ignore blank and in-cell dropdown. In-cell dropdown basically means you get this. So it's like a little checkbox which you click and it will give you the options to choose. If you untick this, then the user has to type in their entry. Now, I generally don't recommend you untick this, folks. That's because it's much easier if the user has an option where they can use their mouse and just tick it. Again, because we're going to stick in an error message, if the user types something wrongly, the error message will keep popping up, and it can get a little frustrating. Now, with ignore blank, this basically means exactly what it says, that if you've got an entry which hasn't been filled in, it will be ignored. Now, again, I'd recommend you just leave this ticked, but depending on your type of data, you can untick it if you want. Now, what I would also do, folks, is make sure this is checked. So this basically will say, apply these changes to all other cells with the same settings. So basically, everything will be applied to where we've got our data validation for this criteria and selected cells. Right. So then we go to error alert. Now this is quite important, folks, because when you're setting up your spreadsheet, you want to communicate to the user an accurate error message. Now the first thing which Microsoft Excel grants you are 3 types of style of warning. So you've got stop, which is a big red X, you've got warning, which is an exclamation mark, and you've got information. Now let's give the user a firm stop. In other words, that they've made a mistake, they need to correct it. Now as a title, we're just going to keep it short. So we're basically going to say error, please select team. Now for an error message, we can go into more detail. So we can just say, please use the drop down to select either beta or gamma. There. Now if I press OK, right, so now our rules are in place. So let's give it a go. So if I go to beta and I click in, I hit the drop down, I can select beta or gamma. So let's select gamma. Right. Let's go to Karen. Now I'll select beta. Okay. Now let's go to Jill. Now I'm going to type in something and let's see what happens. If I type in T and then press enter. Do you see? Our error message has popped up. So it basically says error, please select a team. And then we've got our stop warning sign. Then we've got please use the drop down to select either beta or gamma. Now if you go to cancel, it will actually wipe out what we've typed. So if I repeat that error message, if I go to retry, what it will do here is it will select what we've typed. Now folks, to actually get out of this loop, you have to delete your data, what you've typed. If you don't, and if you click on the drop down, the error message will still pop up because this T hasn't been deleted. So if I go to retry and then just press delete, there. Now the drop down will show and you can just select a team. There. So folks, that's one way of using data validation for tables. Okay, so in the next example, we're going to look at how we can use data validation in terms of asking questions for an Excel user.